Welcome to Chalk and Code,
where the science of learning meets modern technology.
We're bringing together entrepreneurs, product leaders, researchers, and advocates
to spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of learning.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Chalk and Code. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dora Palfi, co-founder and CEO of Imagi Labs, a company that's rethinking how we introduce young people to coding and AI. What started as a Kickstarter-backed programmable wearable designed to inspire girls to code has evolved into an AI-powered learning platform used by schools to teach Python, creativity, and responsible AI literacy. Along the way, Dora has become one of the leading voices on what coding education should look like in the age of generative AI, not replacing human creativity, but amplifying it. Named to Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe, Dora is helping shape a future where students don't just consume technology, they build with it. Dora, welcome to Chalk and Code.
Thank you for having me.
I've really been looking forward to our conversation. Let's start by, could you tell us a little bit about Imagi, like what it is and what your mission is?
Yes. Well, you covered a lot in the introduction from sort of like the initiation of it, which was very much like coding focused, to today, very much thinking about AI and of course, kind of keeping up with how the world is changing. But the mission of the company has really been the same. And the reason why we started Imagi was because my co-founder Beatrice and myself had this sort of foundational understanding and belief that technology has a disproportionate power to shape our future. And if we don't have sort of like diversity, we don't have diverse voices in technology, and we don't give the opportunity to everyone, regardless of their background, to be part of that future, then that future just won't be as good as it could be, won't be as beneficial for everyone. And so that technology shaping our future used to be very much reliant on somebody writing code and creating that technology. And now it's much more about using AI to create, and a lot more of that future is around AI. And so for us, it's really important that kids, regardless of their background, so be that, around gender, race, socioeconomic background, get the opportunity to explore tools and essentially understand what this technology is, and also be able to create with it, like you said, not just consume, but also create with technology. Or the tagline that we often say now is, kind of going from cheating to actually creating with tech. Because when you talk about AI in schools, it's a fact that already 4 out of 5 students use AI for schoolwork. But then a lot of the concern is about, are they cheating with it? And so we cannot just ignore the fact that students use it. Instead, we need to make sure that we teach them how to use it responsibly, safely, in a way that's not shortcutting their own cognitive development and thinking, and in a way that's going to actually serve their future readiness.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll get into the AI in a little bit, but something that really grabbed my attention is the Imagi charm. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but these are wearable, programmable devices with LED lights that make learning how to code more tangible and creative. I'm just curious where the inspiration for that came from and sort of what have been some of the successes with the charms.
Yeah, so initially, Imagi started from some research I did during my master's degree. So my undergrad was in neuroscience and computer science, and then my master's degree in human-computer interaction. So I focused a lot on user-centered design, which pretty much just meant like working together with the intended end users. And so in the beginning, we worked a lot with girls specifically, but also with kids from various backgrounds, and co-created different product ideas. And actually, like, kids were literally building with paper and clay, and just creating these prototypes. And then we sort of analyzed the design features of that. And there was this one idea from a group of girls that was a programmable phone case, because they thought it would be really, really cool if they could, customize and express themselves through actually like an accessory that they can code. And sort of that's what eventually led to the Imagi Charm. And so today the Imagi Charm is sort of part of our foundations module, which is used by kids as young as like 3rd grade up to maybe 6th or 8th grade. And then after that comes the AI piece. And when it comes to like understanding and learning technology, there's also a lot of conversation around like screen time and using screens. And we do think that for the younger kids, it's really nice to have this sort of like physical, tangible experience that's not just necessarily tied to a screen, and lessons where a lot of the activity can happen like away from this like one-to-one screen interaction.
That's great. And I think the charm really emphasizes like creativity, identity, self-expression, instead of just like solving a puzzle or something like that. Why do you think creativity is such an important gateway into computer science?
For us, and I don't know if you're familiar, for example, with Scratch and Scratch's foundations of like the 4 Ps, 4 Ps of creative learning. And these are like peers, projects, passion, play. And so I think it's just like that's the foundations that Scratch has been built on and is successful. And Imagi was also built around similar concepts. And of course, I totally believe in the idea of play. So, learning really happens when you're having fun, where you're engaged at that optimal level. It's not too difficult, it's not too easy. And I also really believe doing it with peers, which part of this like identity and self-expression. And then that like intrinsic motivation comes from the fact that you building projects that are personally meaningful to you. And so that's where actually creating art and creating some kind of artifact is really, really motivating, because it's essentially giving that additional like boost of like, why am I doing this? And I'll be able to wear it, I'll be able to show it. And so that is kind of like the concept and the foundations that we also translate over to our AI courses. And that's also all like project based, and you're able to create personally meaningful projects. And for older students, oftentimes that personally meaningful project can be things like, oh, I'm solving a problem for my community, or, like rooted in maybe like one of the UN SDGs. And for younger kids, sometimes still like the stuff that they make with the Imagi Charm is also rooted in these sorts of like problems, but sometimes it's just like a really fun cartoon character that they like.
Right, right. Yeah, early in my career, I worked for Renaissance Learning, and we did a lot of experimentation with hardware. We worked on the Antron scanners, where kids fill in the little bubbles, which that one was pretty successful. But we worked on a bunch of hardware that was not. So the classroom response systems, which are like remote controls for kids. We worked on some low cost laptops and things like that, and many of these products didn't take off, not because the ideas were bad, but because hardware just introduces a completely different set of challenges like manufacturing, inventory, distribution,
Yes,
packaging, support,
hardware
all
is
that stuff.
hard.
It's expensive, and you don't have the ability to iterate as quickly as like a software product. So I'm curious, what surprised you most about building the Imagi charms, and like were there any hardware lessons or cautionary tales that changed how you think about product development? And like what advice would you give founders who are considering building hardware today?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time to be, well, doing both software and hardware, right? Like with software, of course, when you can vibe code, like things can change really quickly. You can quickly create a prototype. You can't quite do that with hardware, but even when we made the first versions of the Imagi Charm, it was very different from a decade before that, because you could 3D print, you could, put together at least some early versions. I mean, for us, like we do have the Imagi Charm, but it's a very small part of our business today. And like you said, it has a lot of complexities. On the other hand, of course, it also offers a lot of sort of like uniqueness to your solution, especially when you're working with younger people. So it is a very attractive sort of like value proposition. It is something that, if you go to a trade show, like people will look at it like, what is this? It will draw people in. And it's not just yet another app on a screen. So it's, I think, having a part of your offering that is this attractive physical product can be very, very powerful. It can be, sort of remote, like not something that people can really quickly copy. On the other hand, our hardware, first of all, it's a small part of our, our business. And second, it's a very like sort of small hardware. It's not extremely complex. It's not extremely expensive to produce. So I think at least that has given us the opportunity to not have to, overinvest when it comes to, for example, inventory, and be able to navigate the the capital challenges of actually managing a hardware business. But it's like the things that we've been through, these are more just like founder lessons. But like, we started manufacturing like right after like COVID. So there, or like when COVID started, like there were challenges around that, or like shipping challenges, or there's tariffs or there aren't tariffs, or so many things that you have to face when you have a physical product. But of course, it's also beautiful that there is something in the world that you just created from scratch and it works. Like you said, you can't really iterate on it. So I give a ton of credit to my co-founder, who is an extremely detail-oriented person, and made a hardware product that has been just extremely reliable, and we haven't had much trouble with it out in the wild, even though kids might be throwing it around. Like we did like throw testing and whatnot in the office. So they're very durable.
So thinking about the evolution, you started with hardware, focus on girls, and that has evolved into more of an AI-powered education platform for schools. Like thinking back on that evolution, what was the hardest pivot and how did you know it was the right one?
When we started, we focused on like a direct to consumer approach. Like you said, we had a Kickstarter campaign, which is a very natural thing to do when you're starting out with a like sort of consumer hardware for learning, right? Because to find like early backers who can actually, and the point of Kickstarter, right, is sort of like you're removing the risk of that first batch of production and you actually get the finances from customers pre-ordering your product. Because it's a very natural kind of like route to do more of like a direct to consumer route. And so we started then sell or continued selling the Imagi on Amazon and like selling it directly to parents. And we had a very like popular consumer app so kids could actually just learn at home. And that was a very fun path for us. But we also had a lot of teachers who started using it and started asking for very like school specific sort of use cases and features and capabilities, especially on the software end. And that kind of like presented us with a like a decision point, like are we going to focus more on the at-home use or at the school use? And so we sort of pivoted into that school use. And for us, that kind of really linked back to our initial mission, like why are we doing this? We really wanting to reach all kids. And so we believe that there's a much better chance of doing that by working with schools and sort of like in classroom setting, because we were aware that a lot of the sort of purchases and usage comes from otherwise when you go on the consumer route comes from kids whose parents are in tech or very aware of tech and sort of not necessarily serving that purpose. And so I think for us it was really about like going back to like why are we doing this? And then the same thing with AI, right? Like I definitely see that there is a place for like computer science education in the traditional sense. And even in our curriculum, there is space for that because we think like kids should understand the foundations. But again, going back to our mission was about getting kids of all backgrounds really ready for the future and for where the world is going. And then we can't just like shut our eyes to the changes that are happening and just sort of like closing on, oh, but schools won't move that quickly or schools still want to teach computer science. Yes, that's true, but that's not enough to kind of stay relevant in this world. So I think it's always been about like tying back to why are we doing this?
So thinking about that, thinking about equity, I listened to your TED Talk, which is great, and listeners should go find that and listen to that. It's great. You talked about how AI can become the greatest equalizer if we get it right, and if we get it wrong, it can be a divider. Can you share more about how we get it right? Like, what do we need to change about education to get it right? How do we protect human agency? How do we rethink how we measure student outcomes?
Right. Yeah. So I do think there's like a couple parts to it, right? And thank you. That talk just came out, so it's very very fresh. Um, but I also speak about the fact that while in industry when there's a new technology, everyone like jumps on it and wants to try it. In education, it's kind of the opposite. Like we have this initial sort of step of like let's just block this, which I do say in the talk as well that it's a feature, it's not a bug. Like it makes sense. Education does have to be careful. We're sort of testing new things on young people. But on the other hand, again, we can't ignore the fact that students are using these tools anyways. And so I do think there needs to be this like recognition and we need to like put in the hard work of creating these AI policies and upgrading and updating your curriculum and rethinking what is it that we're testing in schools because if we like keep testing the same things that we've been testing for decades and our students know that like hey AI can solve this in a second, like why am I doing this, like it's not like they understand that that's not actually a useful skill set for the future, then they will not be motivated to actually learn. So I think we do have to kind of like step up of what we teach and what we also expect of our students so that they essentially get relevant skills for the future. And that part of relevant skills are sort of like the foundational skills of like, reading, writing, and numeracy and critical thinking. But part of that, especially when it comes to sort of middle school and high school, is about the modern technologies as well.
So you've said that coding isn't dead, it's evolving because of AI. What would you say educators are doing well or maybe getting wrong with teaching computer science in the AI era?
I mean, it's so new and it changes so quickly. And so that's why I think it's sometimes think about it, it's almost like expecting teachers to figure everything out. Like teachers are like the frontline workers, right? That's like as if like in COVID we would have said like nurses just like go figure this out, or like doctors. Um, so I think like we have to sort of give a lot of credits to teachers because they are in the classroom teaching every day, and on top of that like expected to also like figure all this out when an average person also doesn't have time to understand everything around AI. So I do think we need to actually provide a lot of support from like the top, and create space for training, and probably that means that if we expect teachers to attend additional training on top of what would normally be expected, then we have to make sure that they are either like compensated for that extra time, or it comes from the time that it is their working hours. So I do think there has to be essentially like a fair system for providing these new skills for our teachers, so that then they can provide the new skills for our students.
When AI can generate working code in seconds, can you talk a little bit about what skills become even more important for students to develop?
So I think like both with code and with maybe like text, right? Like I think the biggest challenge right now, one of the biggest challenges right now, is that when we are in the workforce, like everyone wants to hire sort of like senior people. And then why are senior people good at this? Because they've been doing this for a long time. So then how do we go from like being a junior to senior, where nobody wants to kind of pay you to go through that level of experience, right? And so I do think that we need to essentially like provide these sandbox environments where you can sort of like train to become better at this, and there has to be some level of like being that editor. So essentially like understanding what is the code that's being written. And for that, probably you have to like still write some of it yourself and then go and read more of it. Of course, it depends, what is your like career goal. Like I'm not saying everybody needs to be really excellent at that. If you are trying to get deep into the industry, then it's still probably like a very useful skill set. So I think it depends a little bit on of course like your career goals. But I think as a foundational literacy, I just the way I just think about it is, right, like schools often teach like how the world around us works. Like that's why we learn physics, that's why we learn chemistry. And I just do think if like we're gonna be living in a world where so much of the stuff that we're facing every day is AI, like, the algorithms that we're using, or maybe there's gonna be like, humanoid robots, then I do think it's part of that like agency that you just simply want to understand what it is. Like it becomes extremely so like patronizing to say, oh, you don't have to worry about all this technology. Like let the couple people who work in the industry, that like small percentage of people, like just handle that for you. So I do think it's about that kind of like, yeah, just giving that agency to everyone. So it's not a black box. You understand how it works, what you should be concerned about, what is that you don't have to be scared about. So I do think yeah, it's just going to be part of like understanding the environment around us.
That totally resonates with me. And it's like you have to sort of be smarter than the tools that you're using, to catch some of the weird things that it can sometimes output, and which requires critical thinking and lots of experience using the tools. So that makes a lot of sense. You've touched on this a little bit. You've spent years trying to close the gender gap in technology. Where have you seen real progress, and what barriers still concern you the most?
I think like especially because I also have the experience being a founder, right? And the startup environment is also like it also has quite a large gender imbalance. And for a long time we thought it was only about like coding, but it is also clear that it's just about the environment itself. Because even if you can sort of like vibe code early prototypes, it's not that like now magically there is more like female founded companies. So I do think in both like technology and startups, it's a lot about like having role models and having successful examples, and there is sort of like some positive reinforcement cycle that there can be more and more girls and women getting into that industry. I do think unfortunately like as a whole like industry at scale, like it hasn't changed a lot. And if you look at numbers, it's not because like there's more women like in total number working in tech than, a decade ago. But because the industry grew so quickly, actually the proportion of women just became smaller. And so that's something that's sort of unfortunate, and for us building imagi, it's also like about how can we get to a scale where we can actually have a meaningful impact on the numbers. And so what we measure as success is sort of that confidence and interest increase, because when you are exposed to these technologies at a younger age and kind of like tying back to that intrinsic motivation, then there is a higher chance that you will, be part of it in your adult life as well. And so actually showing that technology can be used for good or used for solving like problems that you personally have is one of the most like proven methods for engaging, for example, girls. Like they tend to really care about like what is this good for and not like learning technology for the sake of technology.
Yeah, every founder I think has a moment where reality kind of forces you to rethink your assumptions, and just curious, like, have you had that moment? What was it? What did it teach you about product market fit? What lesson learned are there?
Um, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of assumptions, right? And I think like one of it that I have mentioned was sort of around this like shift from consumer to education, where our assumption that we could just reach every girl or every kid just by having an app, we kind of face that, oh no, like actually it's mostly like the parents who bring these tools to their kids. So if we're going through parents, then we're just reaching the parents whose kids would anyways be sort of exposed to technology. So I think for us, that was like a big sort of like assumption check.
Is there a favorite student project or a favorite moment where a student has connected with your products or your curriculum that you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, there's so many examples. I think like one specific, it's not necessarily a project, but something that we remember so well when we got an email, I think from a parent that like their kid wanting to have an imagi themed birthday party. And if we could send some stickers and, like we felt like, okay, that's how you know we made something that kids really like. And they want their birthday party to be imagi themed.
That's like Spider-Man level marketing success. Good job. So you guys have built Imagi with relatively lean funding while competing in a rapidly changing AI market. How have resource constraints like made the company better? What's surprised you?
Yeah, I also think, right, that's like a big like female founder experience where you are very much sort of like from the start thinking about, oh, how do we get revenue, right? Because rather than going for funding, you're very much focused on how do we make this essentially as a business work. So I would say that I think, it makes you just like focus on that for better or worse from the beginning. And I do think, yeah, it probably helps you focus in some ways because you know that you just need to make things work with what you've got, and so focus on sort of like the next steps within that constrained matter. I do think, especially in the beginning, like when we switched to sort of like education, and we really focused on like figuring out what the education market needs, like move as quickly as sort of like industry, right? And which like I also mentioned with the adoption. So I think it can be actually healthy in the beginning to not to try to just like on day one like blow up when like and reach everyone, because at the end of the day you need sort of like proof that this works. So I do think for education companies it can be healthy to have like more foundation and research and really see the impact before trying to like hyperscale.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. If you walked into, let's say, an ideal middle school classroom, computer science classroom, 10 years from now, what would students be doing and what role would AI play in that experience?
Oh wow. I do think I do believe that we should have this like AI native classrooms. I think there might still be like a dedicated computer science and AI class, but actually to me it's also about using these technologies across the board in various subjects, right? So again, I think it's about like asking kids today to write an essay is a bit of a tricky way to test their actual knowledge and understanding. But instead, if in history class your students have to create a final project where maybe they make like a historical figure come to life as like an avatar who actually, it doesn't have to be like, any copyright or IP problem. Like, let's say if you're learning about ancient Rome, then maybe you have to create an avatar character that actually represents what it was like during that time and look like that. And, then you have to use a ton of different AI tools to create this experience, to create this interactive like project and presentation and immersive experience. So I do think that's where like education is sort of going, that you can essentially bring in technology and AI in a smart way across the board. I do personally also really believe, in sort of like kind of away from screen time. And that's where I think like educators are so essential. Like I don't believe in a future where it's like one-to-one to your laptop sort of experience the whole time. Like I think like having a personal tutor can be helpful, but I think having that like social experience and having a lot of collaboration and interaction, creating things together is going to be incredibly important as well. So I just imagine this sort of like augmented experience across the board.
Yeah, there does seem to be like this, the pendulum swings between
Right.
online, offline, no screen time, everything's paper and pencil suddenly. Like, how are you guys adapting to this world where, or at least in US K-12, there does seem to be this pushback against AI and kids being online at all, and a move towards like paper and pencil. So just curious, like what you guys are thinking about that or how you've adapted to that.
Yeah, so we don't actually currently offer anything for really young learners where it's most of the pushback is really, like kindergarten and first and second grade. And even our computer science, like the Imagi Charm offering starts in third grade. So we have seen that, especially for high school, there isn't that much of a pushback. Middle school, it's also expected that students would spend some time, on a screen. So I think, we are also just trying to find that healthy balance, and also like look at our own curriculum. And like I mentioned, even from the start, we like in every lesson plan we have like unplugged activities. So first maybe you plan something on paper. So I think it's also something for schools to understand that it's healthy that like in a 45-minute or 60-minute period, even though this like class might involve some screen time, it should be managed in a way that like actually out of that 60, it's only, I don't know, 20 when the students are like actually building stuff, and the rest is like discussion and collaboration and planning and some instruction time. So I do think we have to find a healthy balance. I think
Yeah.
what I don't agree with is sort of like going back and like trying to replicate what we had in a world that was like completely different from the world today.
Right, right. Yeah, kids have to have exposure to these things so they know how to use them. If every educator listening could adopt just one mindset about AI and coding education starting tomorrow, what would you hope it would be?
I do say this quite often when we're asked about, who kind of like succeeds with Imagi, be that with the coding or vibe coding or like AI solutions. And I think for me, like the biggest like common denominator among educators who succeed with Imagi is not about how much experience they've had with coding or computer science or AI. It's more just having like a growth mindset or like an open mind. So I do think it's just that like acknowledgement that there's not like there's no real like true AI experts, really, like very few. There's mostly just people who have experimented more. So it's really just about, trying and testing and making it work for you, and not necessarily just, you know, being afraid of it.
That's great advice. Dora, thank you so much for our conversation today. If listeners would like to learn more about Imagi or if they want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so our website is imagilabs.com. And on socials, we're also at Imagilabs. And feel free to find me personally on LinkedIn, or my email is dora@imagilabs.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dora.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparked new insights or challenged your thinking, we'd love to hear from you.
Visit flexion.us for more information and join us here next time on Chalk and Code.